Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Connection and Spirit and Truth Sanctuary. We begin today with our brand new, we introduced it last week, our brand new morning blessing for the year 2022. Spirit of Truth, we give thanks today for our connection in this time of togetherness, for our sameness as well as our contrast, and for the light we reflect to one another and see in one another. We give thanks for the holy that holds us and for the humanity that always brings us back to the holy. We ask that our happiness, our peace, and our joy now be woven into the fabric of the world around us and that it serve as nourishment to feed the heart of the collective. In the name and nature of the Christ, amen, and so it is. Before we move on, I have a little funny story about last week. Randy Renfro was here. He was walking back and forth. He was doing something else in the offices, but he could hear what was going on in here. And so, of course, it was the first time he had heard this prayer as well. And afterwards, he was telling me that he was laughing because when I said the line, we give thanks for our sameness, he thought I said saneness, as in sanity. And so then when I said after that, as well as our contrast, he was like, okay, so we're giving thanks for the crazy too? and then he realized it was sameness. So because he did not have the benefit of seeing the words on the screen. So that's our little joy of the Lord this morning. I also have one more thing I want to say today. It is Reverend David Michael Searcy's birthday today. So happy birthday, Reverend David Michael. I know yesterday was Billy Smith's. I know we have some towards the end of the week. I know I'm leaving some out. These are just the ones I know about. So happy birthday, Reverend David Michael. Okay, our quotes. When nothing is sure, everything is possible. Margaret Drabble. That's a great way to look at it. Instead of being in a place of uncertainty and letting fear come in, change your perspective, shift your lens to that, okay, well, because nothing is certain, because nothing is sure, that means everything/anything is possible. Next, do less with more focus. Next, if you're searching for that one person who will change your life, take a look in the mirror. And this last one is a little long, but very, very good and pertinent to today's teaching. To let go isn't to forget, not to think about or ignore. It doesn't leave feelings of anger, jealousy, or regret. Letting go isn't winning and it isn't losing. It's not about pride and it's not about how you appear. It's not about obsessing or dwelling on the past. Letting go isn't blocking memories or sad thoughts and doesn't leave emptiness, hurt, or sadness. It's not giving in or giving up. Letting go isn't about loss and it's not about defeat. To let go is to cherish good memories, overcome bad ones, and move on. It's having an open mind and confidence in the future. Letting go is accepting. It's learning and experiencing and growing. To let go is to be thankful for the experiences that made you laugh, made you cry, and made you grow. It's about all that you had in the past, all that you have now, and all that you soon will have. Letting go is having the courage to accept change and the strength to keep moving. Letting go is growing up. It's realizing that sometimes giving the heart time can be the most potent remedy. To let go is to open a door, to clear a path, and to set yourself free. Okay, I love that one. So I wasn't really sure what to call today's teaching, so I settled on the joys of January. We're going to cover several different concepts, some that are an extension of some things we've discussed over the last few weeks, which I will refer back to as we go along. But what connects all of our concepts and themes today is what time of year it is, specifically the month of January. I can't say that January is my favorite month because especially as I get older, I prefer warm weather to cold weather, and we do not get a lot of warm weather in January. But it is my birth month, and so it's pretty high up there on my list of favorites, probably second behind like April or May. Speaking of my birthday, which is tomorrow, I got one of the best birthday gifts I have ever gotten yesterday from my cousins, Dana and Hannah Harris. No, not yesterday, Sunday. That's when we got together. Knowing how much I love music, as well as the stories behind particular songs and lyrics and the way they were written, and the fact that I love to read, they managed to combine all of that into one pretty perfect gift, which was a 2-volume book set called The Lyrics by Paul McCartney, cataloging his memories of every single song he's ever written, along with lots of photographs. So when I saw it, I almost couldn't speak for a few minutes. I went into a happiness coma. I was in shock that something I didn't even know it existed, but to receive it was just really a joy. So, of course, I've already started reading it, and I want to share with you, to begin today's teaching, an excerpt from the foreword that he wrote himself, because it kind of sets the tone for what I want to talk about today, which is, as I've already mentioned, basically the vibe of the month of January, a time for new beginnings and a clean slate, but also a time for some patient reflection before launching full on into a new year. In this excerpt, he's talking about the conversations he had over a 5-year period with a man named Paul Muldoon, who helped him to write this book. And to me, the process he describes here feels a lot like the month of January always feels. He says, I never thought I would want to analyze these lyrics, many from back in the 1960s and 70s that I hadn't thought about in years, and many I hadn't played in concert for decades. But with Paul, and he's speaking of the other Paul, Muldoon, as my sounding board, it became a challenge, and a very pleasant one, to revisit the songs and pick them apart, to discover patterns that I never knew were there. Okay, time out right here. That's one of the many things that we do in January. At the start of a new year, we go back and we review things from the previous year and analyze them. We decide what's working and what's not. And then, just like our last quote said, that helps us to decide what we need to let go of and what we need to keep. We can also look for patterns that we have developed, and that's the thing about patterns. You have to let a certain amount of time go by before you're able to see them. As you look back over a whole year, it becomes noticeable. You can't just do it in a few days. To truly see a pattern, you have to give it some time. Back to Paul. The act of writing a song, or we could substitute for our purposes today, the act of creating our lives, our reality, is a unique experience unlike anything else I know. You have to be in the right mood and start with a clear mind. Again, that's what January is all about, getting yourself in the right mood and clearing your mind to be creative so that you can create the year that's ahead of you. You must trust your initial feelings. He says that. So we're going to talk a little bit later about feelings and their part to play in this. Because at the beginning, you don't really know where you're going. Okay, once again, a lot like the month of January. My conversations with Paul were much the same. The only thing we knew in advance of each meeting was which songs we would be discussing. Everything else was free rein. Inevitably, long dormant memories were stirred up, and new meanings and patterns suddenly emerged. What was so invaluable about talking to Paul was that one old line would lead to another until all of a sudden a flood of memories I never knew were there would wash over me. It's a lot like entering a forest. At first, you see only the thicket of trees, but as you proceed deeper into the woods, you start appreciating things you might not have noticed before. You begin to look to each side and up and down, noticing all kinds of things that weren't at first apparent. And once you've explored these things, your inclination is to head out of the forest. And each time you go back in, the tendency is to take that same path again and again. But if you continue to repeat yourself, which is so easy to do, eventually you might recognize that you haven't made any progress. Okay, timeout number 2. We talked about that a little bit last week too, that you can't, if you want to, if you're not willing to be unstable or on one foot for a minute, you can't ever move forward. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about whether he knows it or not. He's talking about the importance of integration. He was saying that it's important to go back and analyze his songs and the way he wrote them and to recognize patterns, because if he hadn't done this, he would have just kept taking the same path in his songwriting over and over. But giving himself time to stop and analyze gave him a clearer direction of where he was headed and optimized his creativity as a songwriter. And of course, he was referring not only to this past 5 years with his conversations, but he had done this throughout his career. So, this next part of his foreword, I want to read, takes a slight turn from that idea, but it will all fit together in the end. It's kind of the next step in the process. If you find yourself taking the same path over and over again, and you would like to change that, you've got to, number one, make some space for something new. You've got to clear out some space. Number two, you've got to believe that whatever that something new is, it will come to you. You've got to have faith that it will. So let me read the next excerpt, and then I'll explain a little further as I'm reading. Keep in mind that in order to create something new, sometimes you have to go through a period of uncertainty. Like I just said, you have to be comfortable with a little mystery, which leads nicely into what he writes next. He says, "It's a mystery how all this happened. People stop me in the street and they can get very emotional. They say, 'Your music changed my life.' And I know what they mean, that the Beatles brought something very important to their lives. But it's still a mystery, and I don't mind ending up being a mystery. With regard to this all-pervading mystery, there's one incident I'll always remember. We were driving north in a van, just the four of us Beatles and our roadie. It was freezing cold during a big blizzard, and we couldn't even see our hands in front of our faces. All we could do was basically follow the tail lights of the car in front of us. At one point, the snow was so bad our van spun out of control and slipped sideways down an embankment. We looked up at the road, shaken but okay, and we thought, how the hell are we going to get back up there? It was a mystery, but one of us, I can't remember who, said, something will happen. Some people might find this outlook, something will happen, simple or banal, but I think it's a great philosophy. Something will happen is the idea that no matter how desperate you are, no matter how bad everything seems, something will happen. I find that idea helpful, and I think it's a philosophy worth holding on to." End quote. All right, so we can apply that to everything that's happening right now in our world. A lot of us may feel like we have spun out of control and slipped sideways down an embankment. We may feel like we're in the middle of a blizzard so strong that we can't see our hand in front of our face. We have no idea what's coming next or how we're going to get from where we are to where we want to be. So it's important to have as our attitude this philosophy given to us by Sir Paul McCartney that something will happen. We will find a way forward. But that clear path that is the road to our future may be a mystery for a bit. And that's okay, because it's good to have a little time to revisit and analyze the past so we don't get stuck just using that same path, that same method over and over again. In order to do that, you have to be patient, which a lot of us are not good at. But at the beginning of a new year, there are always decisions that need to be made. And sometimes we can feel a lot of pressure to make them, But let me just give you a little hint. They don't all have to be made by January 1st. So let's talk about patience for a minute. Several years ago, I gave you a list that I had gotten from an article, and unfortunately, when I went back to my notes, I had not written down who wrote the article, but the name of it was 7 Ways That Patience Increases Your Capacity for Success. And I'm not going to go through all 7 again today, but just 2 that I felt were pretty important. Number 1, When it comes to making good decisions, which we've already talked about, that's basically what we do at the beginning of every year, decide what the plan is going to be. Patience is our most formidable resource. When we are patient, we stay out of the negative stories that can cloud our judgment. What ifing ourselves with disastrous outcomes is typically human, but also completely destructive to our capacity to make sound decisions. When we are patient, we have the mindfulness to stop and focus on the present moment. We are able to make wise choices that take both the big and the small picture into account. Okay, so remember we talked about this last week, balancing the contradictions, knowing that stopping and focusing on the present and not getting stuck in either the past or the future is important, but that it's also important not to focus so much on the present moment that we get stuck there and we can't move forward. As always, you have to learn how to maintain the balance. All right, continuing on now with the article. There is a difference between simply waiting and being patient. You can wait impatiently. Pacing the floor with your heart racing, imagining that your child is possibly somewhere in a ditch when he or she is late getting home, is not the same thing as calmly waiting, trusting that nothing is wrong until you hear differently, and knowing there might be 1,000 reasonable explanations. That is being patient. So, number one, patience is a virtue and your ally when you're trying to make a decision, especially a big decision. On to number two. Patience puts us in direct control of ourselves, and there is no more powerful aid to success than self-possession. When we are patient, we give ourselves time to choose how to respond to a given event rather than getting hijacked by our emotions. It allows us to stay gathered no matter what is happening with self-management. We build trust within ourselves and our own capacity to deal with whatever comes our way. All right, so we've talked about this before too, extensively, that it's important to respond rather than to react. And for that, you have to have control of yourself. You have to have what they call in this article self-possession. And as it says here, developing that takes patience. Now, when we think about patience, we necessarily connect it to the concept of time. So let's talk about time for a minute. Robert Madore has this to say about it. Time is simply a man-made invention to count the period of and between events. It does not exist in nature. Since early beginnings, man has tried to give meaning to events to somehow define the past, the present, and the future. Humans are always trying to improve their knowledge of the concept of time. But time does not exist in the known universe as a constant, only in the minds of humans, end quote. All right, so knowing that, we now see that all this pressure to get things done or to make decisions in a hurry is basically self-imposed. Time, as we have come to define it, is not something that's a constant in nature. So we can afford to slow down and not be in such a hurry with things, contrary to what the Western way of life and culture tells us. I was listening to Andrew Martin yesterday, and he was talking about this too. And he had some interesting insights about time, especially this period of time we're in at the moment, which is our topic today, the month of January. He says, our calendar system marks January as the beginning of the year. But I have felt for quite some time that January is a month out of time, as it were, and not necessarily the time for taking big actions, because energetically it is not supported. Energetically, in the month of January, we are not yet ready to move forward, but are still in this phase of getting ready to move into the new thread or the new experience of the new year. We have to remember that linear time, what we measure by a clock or a calendar, is basically an illusion. Certainly there are definite cycles and rhythms that exist, but we have taken them and have defined them sometimes in a limiting way. We have chopped up time into increments that are not necessarily relevant to the natural rhythms and cycles of our lives. Using a calendar or a clock is very useful for keeping up with the events and duties of life, but only from the perspective of the matrix. Once you have liberated yourself from living within the confines of the matrix, the false construct of linear time, you begin to see that what you do and where you go, how you create, and when you decide to be active and when you decide to be dormant really has nothing to do with the clock or the calendar. The external world expects you to make resolutions during the month of January, and there is a lot of pressure for us to set the agenda for the entire coming year in those 31 days in order to make it the best year ever. And you can do that if you want, but energetically, the year doesn't actually get going until the lunar new year begins, which happens in February. All right, so that was very, very interesting to me how he described the month of January. And we talked a few weeks ago about making resolutions anyway, about a different way to approach it, that it's not just, or it's not very effective to just have this list of things that you check mark off that you do every day or whatever, but that it's you figure out what the end result of how you want to feel is, and then you work backwards, seeing what things make you feel that way, and that's how you develop the path, not the other way around, not just trusting that these things this laundry list of things, of self-improvements you want to make is going to lead you to the feelings you want, because they may or they may not. So that's an important little thing about making resolutions. Back to Andrew. I always view January as a time of transition, a little breather, a time to allow yourself to perceive what is before you. I look at it as an odd number of instability and change, month number 1 on the calendar, moving into an even number, month number 2, which has much more solid and stable energy. The month of January is not a time for total inaction, though it might not look like it on the external level, but a time to make sure you are aligned with yourself. Okay, I think I read that wrong. It might look like on the external level that it is completely, and you're being completely inactive, but you're not. So just sit. Just be curious. Allow your mind to wander, okay? What did we talk about last week? Contemplate the contradictions in your life and in your reality, and learn to be comfortable holding two opposing truths in your mind at the same time. Now is a good time to start or to continue the process of integrating your human and your divine. Back to Andrew. One of the beautiful things about allowing yourself some time to be curious before making a big decision is that it gives you time to perceive the resonance or non-resonance of your emotional field. Okay, remember I said at the beginning we were going to talk about how emotions and feelings play into this? Here it is. What he means by that is that before making a big decision, one way or the other, you should allow yourself some time to consider your options. I wish Randy Renfro was in here, because he is the option man. He always has lots of options to give people. Not just to mentally think them through, but to see how you feel when you imagine yourself in certain scenarios. For example, he says, if I do this, option A, how does that make me feel? Versus if I imagine myself doing this, option B, how does that make me feel? You can learn a lot by just going through that practice within yourself. I'll give you a personal example. As a lot of you know, my husband and I, who on this Thursday, the day after my birthday, will have been married 26 years. It'll be our 26th wedding anniversary. But for 3 of those 26 years, as a lot of you know, we separated and almost divorced. So toward the end of those 3 years, I had decided we were not going to spend a lot of money on lawyers and all of that. So I ordered this kit off the internet, online. I forget, LegalZoom.com. And so you could fill out all of the stuff for your divorce papers. So I remember I would, get them out, put them in front of me, and every single time I would take those papers out, I would literally start feeling sick. And I would just put them away and say, I can't even think. I would get a headache, or my stomach would start hurting. And one day I even said, okay, I called Randy Renfro, and I said, one of my best friends, and I said, okay, I'm bringing these papers to the church. I'm just going to lay them out on the desk, and you're going to help me go through them. He's like, yes, as my friend, I will do that for you. And I couldn't do it. I got sick again. So that was my body. That was my higher self. That was my inner knowing telling me, this isn't what you really want to do. You don't want to divorce this man, because every time you sit down and think, imagine yourself as being divorced, your body goes into total shutdown. You can't do it. So that's a personal example of what he's talking about here. He says, I know what I was going to say. We've talked before about this, about your emotions. I know before I said something about, or somebody I was quoting said, your emotions can hijack you, and you can let them do that. But when you are patient and you cultivate that self-possession, you learn to use your emotions. Don't let them hijack you, but instead just let them be your signals, like that of, how do I feel when I think about myself in this scenario? And there is a signal to you about how you really feel deep down about something. So this is how we can use our emotions as allies. Once again, back to Andrew. As you allow yourself to consciously and mindfully explore, your emotions will tell you what you resonate with and what you don't. So let's think of January as our exploratory campaign. Okay, have you ever heard of that before? A lot of times before a candidate will run for office, they won't officially announce that they're running. What they'll do is they'll launch an exploratory campaign just to kind of test the waters and see if they want to go through the process of formally running for an office. So that's what I want us to think about the month of January as. It's kind of an exploratory month of just putting some things out there and seeing how we feel about them. Then he suggests doing a little exercise, which involves journaling, one of my favorite things. He says, if you want to get a sense of what is already active in your emotional field concerning things you need to make a decision about, write it down. Get a piece of paper and say to yourself, whenever I think about moving to a different city, if that's the decision you're trying to make, this is how I feel. Whenever I imagine staying where I am, this is how I feel. It can be anything: starting a new project, making an investment, taking a class, or changing jobs. All you have to do is pay attention and write down the way imagining yourself in these different scenarios makes you feel. And the more clear you get about where your desires are leading you before it's time to actually make a decision, the more prepared you'll be, and the easier it will be for you to hit the ground running. Okay, I'm going to take a sip of water before I go on. He continues, action doesn't only mean going out and actually doing something. Inner work is also an action. Patience is also an action. Being still and silent, waiting for a clear sign that it's time to move in the external, is also an action. It's a lot like warming up your car on a cold day. It's not in drive yet, but it's not totally inactive. It's not in a totally inactive state either. All right, so that's another way to think about what we're doing here in January, what's left of it. I think the end of this week marks the midway, the halfway point through the month. So let's just relax for the next 2 weeks or so and let go of the pressure to have the whole year of 2022 already planned and figured out. If you're still feeling like you're in that blizzard like Paul McCartney and the rest of the Beatles were, just adopt his philosophy. Something will happen. things will become clear. Your emotions will begin to guide you to what's going to be best for you, but you've got to have a little patience. Let me read to you now a beautifully written description of January that includes at the end of it a practical way for us to put our patience into practice that I learned as a part of my yoga practice. This is from the book, The Dance of Time. I've read to you from this book before. In fact, I may have read a little portion of this just a month ago when we were talking about the winter solstice, but a lot of what I'll read to you I know is new. Okay, it says, January marks the end of the revels that from the most ancient of days have celebrated the seeming death and resurrection of the sun at the winter solstice on December 21st. December's crowded joys are over. The presents have been opened, the punch drunk, carols have been silenced by winter's hush. Time loses its sacred quality and becomes again mere time. The child has been born, referring to the new year, and it remains to be seen what the world will do with him. January is named after Janus, the Roman god of portals and doorways, endings and beginnings. He sported two heads. One face looked out, back into the past, the other forward. I should have done it this way. The other forward into the future. Janus occupied the eternal present and served as not only the guardian of time, but as the protector of the here and now. His image was commonly placed above doorways, with one face gazing into the house and the other out into the world. As the god of time, Janus presided over all moments of transition. Okay, we just referred to January as a month of transition. Dawn, noon, dusk, midnight. The Romans also called him with deep affection Pater Matunius, the father of the morning, because Janus was believed to roll back the night and wake up the sun. In keeping with his nature, Janus also brought on the shades of night. The month named after him is considered the gateway of the year. Okay, so that statement that was just made gives credence to what Andrew Martin said. January isn't really, he said, it's the month out of time, as it were. It's just the gateway to the new year. January is a month of dualities and contradictions. Although it is thought of as the opening of gloomy winter after the lights and joys of the holidays, it is also one of the most beautiful months of the year. Nature reveals herself without artifice. Sunlight falls on bare branch, on stone or earth, revealing the hidden contours of nature, the simple skeleton of creation. The song of the birds is more thrilling than at any other time of the year because it is more rare. Each creature glimpsed on a long woodland walk seems like a surviving gift. January bears a vast silence that teaches us to wait for a moment between what came before and what will follow after. I love the way that's written there. That's a beautiful way to put it. The moment between what came before and what will come after. So that reminded me, when I read that, of this breathing technique that I learned in yoga, where you consciously make your in-breath and your out-breath equal length. Many of us just assume that this happens naturally, but it does not. If you stop and think about it, if you really pay attention to it, one is going to be longer than the other. You're either going to breathe in longer and your out breath will be short, or you're going to breathe in short and your out breath will be longer. So this breathing technique focuses on making those two equal, finding the balance. Part of the technique is to hold your breath for just a second or two at what they call the top of your inhale. Like when you breathe all the way in, you hold it for a second or two, and then when you exhale and let everything out, you also hold it for a second or two. So I'm going to read now a little bit about this, which is called pranayama, or conscious breath. Why is breath so important? It's the first thing and the last thing we do in our lives. The one constant thing we all have. Without breath, there is no life. Daily stressors tensions, and physical habits can create physical and energetic obstacles in our bodies. Without even noticing it, our breathing can become gradually more shallow or stilted. We develop unconscious breathing patterns restricting the flow of breath and prana, also known as, a lot of people call it chi or life force. When we work on freeing the breath through pranayama, we are also working on letting the life energy flow through the body. It has the effect of energizing, relaxing, and healing the body, letting everything fall into place. Literally, it is an increase and balance of the life energy in your system. On a physical level, by using pranayama techniques, we can utilize and strengthen the whole range of our respiratory organs, which would be a pretty good idea right now. All of this virus and sickness has concentrated on our respiratory organs. So it will be a great idea to do anything we can to strengthen them. We explore the lower, middle, and upper parts of the breath and regulate the inhalation, retention, and then exhalation of the breath. A regular pranayama practice can stimulate the parasympathetic system, countering the overstimulation our bodies go through during the fight or flight response. We talked about that recently too. Our breathing patterns are also very closely linked to our emotional states. We will breathe in a different way when we are angry, when we are excited, tired, or when we are nervous. However, it works the other way too. We always talk about this. What's the other side of the coin? We can calm or energize ourselves by changing our breathing patterns. Even by just taking time out to consciously become more aware of our breath, we can help to start to alter our emotional states. So, that's a good place to start this month, if this practice this month, if you don't already have it. Just a couple minutes a day, paying attention to your breathing, or knowing that is a tool you have for if you start to feel emotionally spinning out of control, start getting in control of your breath. It will help your body calm down, which triggers your mind and everything else to calm down. Okay, so just relax. Don't let what everybody else expects you to do in January dictate when you decide to act. You have to do that in your own time. As we say around here a lot, in your own space and at your own pace. More than at any other time of the year, it is important to practice patience in January before you get in a big way, as my family says. That's one of our little inside statements we say, which basically means before you bite off more than you can chew, or before you get too far down a road, before you realize you didn't want to be on that road, before you go somewhere that doesn't really resonate with you, just stop and be patient. I want to end today by reading to you my very favorite poem. It's been my favorite poem since I was in my early 20s, and I have recited it to myself many, many times over the years, especially when I have felt anxious that something I really wanted to happen wasn't going to happen, or it wasn't happening as quickly as I would like for it to happen. And of course, as I read it, I'll give you my commentary as well. I've read it to you before, but it's a beautiful poem by John Burroughs called Waiting. Serene, I fold my hands and wait, nor care for wind, nor tide, nor sea. I rave no more against time or fate, for lo, my own shall come to me. All right, so basically, we're not fighting what is anymore. That's the whole concept that we've been studying and learning about from Eckhart Tolle. If the longer you resist what is, the more you fight it. It's like quicksand. The deeper you're going to be mired down in it. I stay my haste. I make delays. For what avails this eager pace? Why are you in such a hurry? I stand amid the eternal ways, and what is mine shall know my face. I love that. So, if we do believe we are eternal beings, if we stand, as it says here, amid the eternal ways, then what is yours is going to come to you. What is mine shall know my face. Asleep, awake by night or day, the friends I seek are seeking me. No wind can drive my bark astray, bark's just another word for boat, nor change the tide of destiny. What matter if I stand alone? I wait with joy the coming years. My heart shall reap where it has sown and garner up its fruit of tears. What is that scripture we always say, that he will give you the joy of dancing instead of mourning? You'll have joy. I wish I could think of the exact way it says, but he'll give you the clothes of joy for mourning. You take off your clothes of mourning and you have joy. Joy comes in the morning. There's so many scriptures in the Bible about that when you sow your sadness will eventually, just like we talk about the wheel, come back to the point of joy. The waters know their own and draw the brook that springs in yonder height. So flows the good with equal law unto the soul of pure delight. Now that is just a beautiful, beautiful way of saying, get happy and see what happens, okay? The good will flow back if your soul is in pure delight. Nothing but pure delight can eventually come back to you. I also like the fact that it talks about the waters, because we've talked about before the fact that our body is made of 70% water. Water represents spirit. So what it's saying is the spirit in you knows the resonant spirits that are out there, and it draws them to you. Okay? The stars come nightly to the sky, the tidal wave unto the sea. Nor time, nor space, nor deep, nor high can keep my own away from me. Okay, so that last stanza always reminds me of that famous passage in Romans 8 that says, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble or hardship or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or sword? No, for I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers or principalities, nor height, nor depth, nor anything in creation shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. And I would add, which is also in me and in you in the form of Christ consciousness. Or, as Andrew Martin puts it in modern language, don't take the bait. Don't buy into the fear that if you don't hurry and do something, buy something, say something, etc., that it will be too late and you'll completely miss out. Know that when something is right for you, when something is meant for you, wild horses could not drag it away. Also, when something is ready to leave your life, encasing it in concrete and bolting it to the floor won't keep it there. So, deep breath in. Deep breath out. Let's let January be our month to just breathe, to be patient, to do our inner work, to warm our car up, but not put it in drive yet, to get really clear about the signals our emotional field is sending us about which direction we want to go in. And above all, to trust and know that no matter how desperate things feel, no matter how tempted we are to be in a hurry, just like Paul McCartney said, something will happen exactly when it is supposed to. Amen. Amen. Thank you for sharing today with me. Join us tomorrow night as we continue Brene Brown's series, The Gift of Imperfections, and then again on Sunday. Hope to see you then. I love you. Be at peace. Goodbye.